So quasi-experimental research is research that's almost like an experiment, but not quite. The word quasi means almost, so it means almost an experiment. In a quasi-experiment, the researcher selects what conditions to compare, just like in an experiment. However, the researcher doesn't randomly assign people to those conditions. For example, as a researcher, I might decide that the two conditions I want to compare are men and women. Those are the two groups of people that I want to compare, but I'm not going to be randomly assigning people to be men or women. So it's not a true experiment, it's a quasi-experiment, because a true experiment has to have random assignment. I might decide that the specific conditions that I want to compare are different ages. I might decide that I want to compare 20-year-olds and 40-year-olds. But I'm not going to be randomly assigning people to be 20-year-olds or 40-year-olds, so it's not a true experiment, it's a quasi-experiment. So a quasi-experiment is closer to being an experiment than a correlational study is, because in a quasi-experiment you're not just collecting data, you're actually selecting what specific groups of people you want to compare. However, you're not randomly assigning people to those groups, so it's not a true experiment. One type of quasi-experiment is developmental research. In developmental research, you compare people at different ages. There's 3 different ways to do a longitudinal study. It can be done longitudinally. That's when you follow a single group of people across time. So if I start with a group of people who are 20 years old, I collect data from them. I wait 20 years. I collect data from them again at age 40. And I wait 20 years and collect data from them again at age 60. That's a longitudinal study. I'm following a single group of people across time and collecting data from that group over and over. In a cross-sequential study, you actually find a different group of people for each age that you want to compare. So if I want to compare 20-year-olds, 40-year-olds, and 60-year-olds, I have to have one group of 20-year-olds, one group of 40-year-olds, and one group of 60-year-olds. And in a cross-sectional study, I would collect data from the 20-year-old group, I would collect data from the 40-year-old group, and I would collect data from the 60-year-old group. And that can all be done at a single point in time. If all my study is just a questionnaire, I could give the questionnaire to the 20-year-old group, the 40-year-old group, and the 60-year-old group on the same day, and then I could possibly just have my study completed in one day. So a cross-sectional study can be done quickly. A cross-sequential study is a mixture of a longitudinal study and a cross-sectional study. In a cross-sequential study, first you select a certain number of the ages that you want to compare. Not all of the ages that you want to compare, but just a certain number of them. And you find a different group of people for each of those selected ages. For example, if I want to compare 20-year-olds, 40-year-olds, and 60-year-olds, I might find one group who's 20 and one group of people that are 40. I just find 2 groups of people. What I then do is, at time 1, I collect data from the 20-year-old group and the 40-year-old group. Then I wait 20 years until my 20-year-old group is now 40 and my 40-year-old group is now 60. And then I collect data from both groups of people a second time. So at time 1, I've collected data from the 20-year-old group and the 40-year-old group. At time 2, I collect data from the same 2 groups of people, but group 1 is now 40 and group 2 is now 60. By doing this type of study, I actually still get data from all of the ages that I want to compare. I still have data at age 20, data at age 40, and data at age 60. And I've actually collected that data from 2 groups of people instead of 3 like I would in a cross-sectional study. So in a cross-sequential study, you're actually following different groups of people across time. In my example, I was following two groups of people across time and collecting data from um, the two groups of people at time 1 and the two groups of people at time 2. A longitudinal study has the advantage of the evidence for development being more clear, because if you're following one group of people across time and you see that they're behaving differently at the different ages, it probably is because of development. It probably is because the people are developing or changing across time. The disadvantage is it takes longer to complete. Also, people are likely to drop out as the study goes forward, especially if it's a long study, like a 60-year long study. And when more and more people drop out, the sample becomes less and less representative. So even if you start out with a representative sample that has a wide variety of people, the sample will probably have less and less variety as time goes on, because certain types of people will drop out. By the time the study is completed, you'll probably have a really motivated group of people who all wanted to complete the study. All of the less interested people, or the less motivated people, will have dropped out already. So it can be a problem because the sample becomes less and less representative and more biased as the study moves forward. It can also be difficult to stay in contact with your participants over a long period of time. If I have to keep bringing the same group of people back every 20 years, that could be difficult because people's phone numbers or email addresses might change during that time. A cross-sectional study has some advantages. It takes less time to complete, and there's also lower dropout rates because, like I said, it can often be completed in one day. But there's disadvantages. The evidence for development is less clear because you're comparing different groups of people. If I'm comparing one group of 20-year-olds, one group of 40-year-olds, and one group of 60-year-olds, and I notice that they're behaving differently, I don't know if it's because that people change from age 20 to age 40 to age 60, or if it's just because my three groups of people have different personalities. It's not clear which one is true. For example, if my 20-year-old group seems to be more extroverted and my 40-year-old group seems to be more introverted, it could be that people become less extroverted from age 20 to age 40, or it could be that I happen to select an extroverted group of 20-year-olds and a more introverted group of 40-year-olds. I can't be sure which one is correct. Also, cohort effects can be a problem because when you're comparing different ages that are far apart from each other, like 20, 40, and 60, you have to realize that those different groups of people come from different generations. So if the 20-year-old group, the 40-year-old group, and the 60-year-old group behave differently during the study, I don't know if it's because behavior changes from age 20 to 40 to 60, or if it's just because those people are from different generations, and that's why they're behaving differently. For example, if the younger group tells me that they use more modern technology, and the older group says that they use less modern technology, it could be showing that people use less technology as they get older. It could be a developmental change, but it could just be that the 20-year-old group grew up with that technology and the 40-year-old group didn't. So it could just be that they're from different generations. It could just be a cohort effect. The cross-sequential study has some advantages because you can compare the different groups of people at a single point in time going this way. You can also follow each group of people across time going this way. So if I have two groups of people that I'm following, and at time 1, the two groups are 40, 20, and 40, and at time 2, they're 40 and 60, I can compare the two groups of people at time 1, and I can also compare the two groups of people at time 2. if I notice that the two groups of people are behaving differently at time 1, and they're also behaving differently at time 2, then that's a pretty strong sign that I'm just looking at differences between the two groups of people, such as differences in personality, or it could be a cohort effect. So any difference that I see going this way between the two groups of people is probably just a difference between those two groups of people, not a difference that's appeared across time, just a difference in personality maybe. But if I notice that a group of people is changing, going this way from time 1 to time 2, that's probably an effect of development. It's probably a change that's happening because the people are developing or changing as they get older. So overall, in a cross-sequential study, I can compare the two groups of people going this way at the same point in time to see if I see a difference in personality or a cohort effect. I can also compare each group of people across time, see if the groups are changing from time 1 to time 2. But the disadvantage of a cross-sequential study is that I'm comparing how one group of people changes from 20 to 40, and I'm also looking at how a different group changes from 40 to 60. So there's a disconnect because if I see that my 20-year-old group changes, if I see that group 1 changes in a certain way from age 20 to age 40, and I notice that the 40-year-old group changes in a certain way from age 40 to age 60, like this, I'll put an example of what I mean here. Here's group 1 and group 2. Maybe I'm looking at shyness across time. And if this group of people, group 1, is, let's say that they're shy at time 1, they have high shyness, but then the shyness goes down at age 40, like this. And this group of people started out less shy, like this, like right here, like the same as this is, and their shyness drops down at age 60. My data from these two groups of people is making it seem like shyness drops from age 20 to age 40 and continues to drop from age 40 to age 60. But I can't be totally sure that that's correct because it could be that when people start out really shy at age 20, like this, and the shyness goes down at age 40, it could be that people's shyness only drops by a certain amount over time, and then it levels off. So it could be that once this group of people goes to age 60, their shyness is going to level out and stay the same. So it could be that when people's shyness starts up here, it only goes down so much and then it levels off. So just because this group of people changed this way from age 40 to age 60 doesn't mean that the same thing is going to happen when this group goes to age 60. So I can't just, it's difficult for me to just take this line here and just tack it on up here and just to assume that this group is going to keep going down just because this group went down. That's a problem with a cross-sequential study. There's a disconnect over time. There's also another type of quasi-experiment in which you're not comparing different ages, but you're comparing different groups of people who have experienced different conditions in the real world, but they weren't randomly assigned to those conditions. So over here, I had a tree diagram. Some of it's cut off now, but I said a quasi-experiment is when there's, up here, I said that there's no random assignment. So it's not like a true experiment that would have random assignment. There's no random assignment here. But unlike in a correlational study, the researcher is selecting what conditions to compare or what situations to compare, but the researcher isn't using random assignment, so it's a quasi-experiment. That type of study can be developmental, but it can also just be comparing different situations that people have experienced. So, in this type of a study that we're looking at here, in this type of a quasi-experiment, you can have the situations experienced before the study, like preschool or no preschool, or it can be situations that are experienced during the study, but without random assignment. If the situations are experienced before the study, it's ex post facto. So in an ex post facto study, you're just collecting data from people who have had different experiences in the past. And usually it's the data is collected with questionnaires. So if I just seek out one group of participants who say they went to preschool, and I seek out another group who say that they didn't, and I give both groups of people a questionnaire, it's ex post facto. I'm just collecting data from people who had different experiences in the past. But if I take groups of people that already exist, like different classrooms, and I assign each group to a different condition during my study, that's actually a non-equivalent groups design down here. So there's no random assignment in this type of study. In a non-equivalent groups design, there's no random assignment, but the conditions are experienced during the study. What you do is you take groups of people that have already been formed, such as different social groups, and you assign each group to a different situation. So like I said, if I pick two different classrooms and I assign one classroom to one condition and the other classroom to the other condition, that's non-equivalent groups. The reason why it's called non-equivalent groups is because since the groups aren't being created through random assignment, there's no way to know if the two groups of people are similar to each other. It could be that one group has one type of person and the other group has a different type of person. So, not now let's look at some examples. Ex post facto could be comparing a group of participants who had a job loss with a group who haven't had a job loss. I said preschool and no preschool already. Or comparing a group of participants who said they had therapy in the past with a group who said they had no therapy in the past. So this is ex post facto. And notice how it's not just a correlational study because I am selecting what specific conditions I want to compare. I decided I want to compare these two conditions. But it's not a true. even though I am selecting my conditions to compare, it's not a true experiment because there's no random assignment to conditions. These could be ex post facto. I said teaching two different classrooms in different ways. One classroom gets assigned to one teaching method. The other classroom gets assigned to another teaching method. That's non-equivalent groups. So these other two would also count as non-equivalent groups designs because the two teams already existed before I decided to coach them differently. The two prisons already existed before I decided to run them with different levels of security. So there's no random here, there's no random assignment to teams. Here, there's no random assignment to prisons. And up here, there's no random assignment to classrooms. These are the non-equivalent groups designs. Two groups that already existed ahead of time are being assigned to different conditions during the study. That's the difference between them. Only a true experiment actually shows strong evidence for cause and effect. A quasi-experiment doesn't really show strong evidence for cause and effect, just like how the correlational study doesn't show strong evidence for cause and effect. But both the correlational study and the quasi-experiment have better external validity, typically, than an experiment does, because quasi-experiments and correlational studies usually have more real-world data, not data that just came from a laboratory. But and also quasi-experiments, the reason why quasi-experiments have to be done instead of real experiments with random assignment is because when you're studying real-world topics like different teaching methods or different coaching methods, you often can't randomly assign people to those groups, which is why you have to do a quasi-experiment. Like I can't randomly assign people to different prisons or to different sports teams or to different classrooms. But the internal validity, so since random assignment is missing, the cause and effect evidence becomes weaker and internal validity goes down. But that can be improved by using matching techniques, by creating matched pairs in which each person in group 1 is matched with the most similar person in group 2, and the two people in each pair are compared with each other. That can help improve the cause and effect evidence of a quasi-experiment.